soon as we had recorded the video and people started responding to it, something really powerful and lovely happened. People responded essentially saying, wow, politics has become such a selfish, bitter, ego-driven thing. The idea that people could approach it as a team sport in pursuit of a better future for our city, this feels really hopeful. And, went into it like ranked choice math, but came out of it feeling something more like solidarity.
So, Christine, who are we canceling today?
The New York City mayor's race, Kate.
We've been around the political game, you and I, for a long time. And it's very rare that we see an upset to the scale that we saw with Zohran Mamdani's win a couple weeks ago. And I'm so excited to get into this.
Yeah, I mean, he really electrified voters. And even I felt hope, like down in Washington, D.C. I think that he was already running an amazing campaign and obviously had the infrastructure and the messaging, but he did have a secret weapon.
I think you might be talking about our guest today. Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin Burns.
And I'm Christine Grimaldi.
And you're listening to Cancel Me Daddy,
the show where we take a closer look at all the panic around cancel culture.
With thoughtful analysis.
And verbal shitposting.
I'm so excited. We have former mayoral candidate Brad Lander on. He and Zohran cross-endorsed each other. And I really think that helped Mamdani get over the finish line.
You may also recognize Brad Lander from his recent ICE arrest where he was tackled while trying to escort someone out of the courtroom after his asylum hearing.
Yeah, we get into that arrest, his cross-endorsement with Mamdani, as well as the media discourse around anti-Semitism following Mamdani's win. And without further ado, let's get into our interview with Brad Lander, the New York City comptroller. Comptroller?
Brad Lander, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Brad, we're very excited to speak with you. In particular, I thought you did a lot of really cool things on the campaign trail in the mayor's race. But first and foremost, a question that I think is on everybody's mind. Is it comptroller or controller?
So I try to keep everything under control, but I believe that the proper pronunciation is actually controller. It's mostly like an odd French misspelling of an English word. Now, my kids say, Dad, you're way too controlling already. Generally, I say control.
Obviously, I think most people now know you for the mayor's race, right? You cross-endorsed with Zohran Mamdani, who unexpectedly won the primary, or was it expected? Like, did you think that he was going to win, or what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, at the beginning, by the end, I did think he was going to win, although it was by a bigger margin than I expected. But no, at the beginning, I mean, I got in the race to win it and didn't go quite as I mapped it out. But I do feel really proud of the race we ran. No, and I mean, like pretty much everyone else, when he got in the race, I assumed he was essentially too far to the left for the electorate. I'm controller because 4 years ago, the vast majority of people who voted either for Maya Wiley, the progressive candidate in the race, or for Catherine Garcia, the more technocratic or competence candidate in the race, voted for me for controller. That's the coalition I've had as a pragmatic progressive. I had the endorsements both of the New York Times and of AOC for controller. And that was the coalition that I thought would be necessary to defeat Eric Adams when we thought he was the opponent. And then Andrew, as it became clear that he would get in. Obviously, through the race, I was watching the excitement that Zohran was building, the way in which the both political and media and attention landscapes really he was playing them very well and building this coalition. And all along, I knew we wanted to beat Andrew Cuomo. And so as we came down the stretch, that's where I put my focus.
I wanted to get a little bit in the weeds on the politics of this, right? Because New York City has ranked choice voting, which I think is more and more common these days, but mostly unfamiliar to a lot of voters. But I was very interested in the way that the two of you cross-endorsed each other and said, oh, if you rank me first, rank the other one second. And, I think there was some messaging on don't rank Andrew Cuomo, or at least rank Andrew go lower. But I thought it was really interesting because you have, like you said, that sort of progressive coalition that you've historically been a part of. And then you're joining with the further left candidate in a cross-endorsement. And I wanted to get your thoughts on why you decided to do that, because you could have just as easily just not done that.
Yeah. And ranked choice voting is new here, and we all are trying to figure out kind of how it works. 4 years ago in that mayoral race that I mentioned, when I won for controller, had Catherine Garcia and Maya Wiley cross-endorsed each other, probably one of them would have won. Instead, they didn't do that. And Eric Adams won. And we have this crappy timeline with a mayor who sold our city out to Donald Trump, demonized and scapegoated asylum seekers, and let corruption take over at City Hall. He was not on my ballot, but I do think part of the fault for his mayoralty lies in the fact that they didn't cross-endorse. And from the beginning, I was saying that. And I was saying to people, we're going to need a more strategic and disciplined approach to ranked choice voting. And I even said to some of the people around me, look, I want to be in first place. I want to be in position to win. But if it comes time to tell me it is necessary to engage in a model of ranked choice or cross-endorsement in which I'm probably not winning, please come hold me accountable to it. I don't want to wake up the day after Election Day and feel like I was responsible for letting Andrew Cuomo become the mayor. And, it basically got to be that time in this race. And we had the Working Families Party, which is a progressive political party here, had put a slate out of 4 candidates, me, Zohran, Zelnor Myrie, and Adrian Adams, and encouraged people to rank that slate and not rank Andrew Cuomo. And I should be clear here. It's not just that Andrew Cuomo is a billionaire-backed moderate. It's that decency and integrity matter in government, and having someone who's a sexual harasser or who's an abuser in all his relationships, warrants corruption, and who never once took responsibility for the decisions that he made and the harm he caused just seemed to me to be unacceptable. And so that was clear to me all along. But it was interesting because even though we were all saying, all 4 of those candidates, rank the slate and don't rank Andrew Cuomo, it didn't have the same sort of emotional resonance. I just don't think people heard it as, okay, these folks are trying hard together to make sure that we get a forward-looking, focused on cost of living and affordability, decent new mayor. And so as it came down the stretch, I thought, all right, if I think 4 years ago they should have done that cross-endorsement, the right thing to do is to do it now. And I went into it thinking about it a little more like ranked choice mathematics, right? We need a majority of voters to vote not Andrew Cuomo, and that means asking my voters and Zohran's voters to cross-endorse, so it'll add up to a majority. But even though I went into it thinking about it like ranked choice math, almost as soon as we had recorded the video and people started responding to it, something really powerful and lovely happened. People responded essentially saying, wow, politics has become such a selfish, bitter, ego-driven thing. The idea that people could approach it as a team sport in pursuit of a better future for our city, this feels really hopeful. And, went into it like ranked choice math, but came out of it feeling something more like solidarity.
And did this, your awareness of Andrew Cuomo and that he should not be ranked first, how long did this go back? Did this go back to his governorship? Did this go back longer than that? Because, the Cuomo family is such a, institution in New York State. I should say that I'm originally from Staten Island, which is where the Italians won't even vote for Cuomo. So it feels like full circle to be on this podcast.
Yeah, actually, I was going to jump in really quick and say I was born in upstate New York, and Mario Cuomo, who is Andrew's father, was the governor when I was growing up. So
yeah.
And Mario was someone who was inspiring to a lot of us. He had that, famous phrase, you campaign in poetry and govern in prose. And he was someone who I think both more liberal or moderate members of the party and more progressive members of the party saw as building a more forward-looking, hopeful coalition, whether, of course, you don't agree with everyone 100% of the time, but someone with a really hopeful, inspiring vision of politics. I don't know that it's worth going back decades. Andrew has always had a pretty dark, kind of more dark arts suspect side of the work, going back to his father's campaign against Ed Koch, with some, being alleged to have engaged in homophobic campaigning, through being, running against Carl McCall, the kind of first Black attorney general, in a way that he took a lot of heat, I think quite appropriately, for But it was his time as his governor that when he really came to my attention as someone with a lot of corruption around him. He created a whole anti-corruption commission, the Moreland Commission. And then when it got too close to him, shut it down. One of his senior aides was found to have engaged in corrupt activities. I mean, he was long known to be just personally abusive, looking at every relationship as an opportunity for his own power and interest. But then as it came out that there were all these incidents of sexual harassment. And then in COVID, as people remember, while he was up in front of the cameras every day in those briefings that brought a lot of people comfort, he nonetheless made this decision to send seniors into nursing homes against the orders of the Center for Disease Control. That was a mistake that maybe he could have corrected, but then rather than do that, essentially lied about it, marked up the state health department report in order to protect his $5 million book deal, and then just kept doubling and tripling down on it. He went into court to force taxpayers to spend $60 million on his own legal bills for those corruption and sexual harassment allegations. So this is just someone who, in every situation, for himself and not for New York.
Christine here. If you're enjoying this episode, consider subscribing. We publish every other week, so be sure to ring the bell to be notified for our next episode. Well, I think that we also talked about Cuomo quite a bit because at best he bills himself as a centrist Democrat. And I know that we wanted to talk about whether Zohran's victory and your cross-endorsement maybe means that the Democratic Party, or at least voters, whether they're consider themselves Democrats, Democratic Socialists, or Working Families Party, what have you, are moving to the left and that it is acceptable and perhaps even more authentic to kind of embrace these leftist principles and put them into practice. What do you see this victory and this experience that you had as kind of signaling for the future?
In this race especially, Andrew Cuomo really ran as the candidate of the billionaire class. He had much more money raised through his super PACs than he did into his own campaign. Down the stretch, Mike Bloomberg gave him $8 million. He got $1 million contribution in the super PAC from DoorDash. I was proud when I was in the city council to pass a law that made New York City the first place in the country to guarantee living wage pay for deliveristas. And DoorDash doesn't want to pay their workers living wage. So what do? Drop $1 million into Andrew Cuomo's super PAC so that he would win and get rid of it. Bill Ackman, the leading enemy of DEI and civil rights, dropped $500,000 in. Oh yes, I mean, he's got a long history as a moderate or a centrist Democrat, but he was running as like the candidate of plutocrats. Mm-hmm. To some extent afraid of Zohran, but to some extent just wanting this dark, kind of we're in a crisis and I will fix it kind of politics. And people are tired of it. And you really could feel this out in the street. The hopefulness in Zohran's campaign, not just the focus on affordability and cost of living and an economic agenda, but a much more hopeful vision for the city. And then the way our cross-endorsement, I think, was enabled more liberal, progressive, and democratic socialist and leftist voters to find common cause in saying, we want to focus on affordability, we want decent government, and we don't want a mayor elected with the support of, billionaires and plutocrats and corporate interests. So it really did bring people together. I mean, I think in ways he maybe didn't mean to. Opposition to Andrew Cuomo put a broader coalition of progressive and liberal Democrats together. Now, I've got a long history, being part of that broader coalition through the Working Families Party. The work I'm proudest to have done in the city council is showing up for those deliveristas and Uber and Lyft drivers and fast food workers and freelancers. And we helped integrate the middle schools of the school district I represent and focused on affordable housing. So that's a coalition I have long believed is necessary for New York City, and especially at this moment in time. But I will say one more thing here, as much as I'm a proud progressive Democrat. I don't think the line right now for Democrats is best understood as between progressives and moderates. I think it's between fighters and folders. I think at this moment with Trump, people want someone who is fighting for something. Yes, who has a bold vision of a more affordable and inclusive future, but also just less tied to status quo politics of the past and more willing to stand up to Trump and fight on behalf of some values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost feel like the word bipartisan is something that voters are tired of hearing about, especially Democratic voters, especially when you have a Trump, like a Trump-led party that is just so enamored with seemingly fascist ideology. And those are my words. I will say
No,
that.
no,
Yeah.
I'll use them. And I think this is important. And I do think one more thing here that's important and instructive for Democrats. I'm excited in New York City about the possibility of a future that uses government in a bold and ambitious way to really confront the affordability crisis, to genuinely build a lot more affordable housing and protect tenants and dramatically expand childcare so working families can afford to live with dignity in our city. But at the national level, I'm also fine teaming up with moderates who are running in different kinds of districts that maybe, have a different character, but who at least know what time it is in terms of our democratic emergency and see that building a concentration camp in Florida and rendering people to their deaths in South Sudan and passing a hideous bill that will cause people to die by stealing healthcare while quintupling that immigration enforcement regime requires a broader coalition. So, we can have these tussles within the party, present something more exciting that'll work in New York City, and also build that broader national coalition that we need to stand fascism.
I wanted to ask, I think one of the turning points in this race, at least from my mind, was when you were arrested by ICE, defending, somebody down at the courthouse, I believe.
Step back. You don't have authority to arrest U.S. citizens. Sir, you don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens. Stay back. You don't have I'm not obstructing. I'm standing right here in the hallway. I asked to see the judicial warrant. By asking for a judicial warrant? You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens asking for a judicial warrant.
And I felt like that was a big moment for you in terms of at least attention and publicity, but I think it also made you one of the breakout stars of the race, along with Mamdani, right? Why was it important for you to be there in that moment to defend, your fellow residents of New York City?
Yeah. And I mean, it certainly was not something I was expecting as a breakout moment. I had been several times to the court in previous weeks before. About a month prior to the election day, Department of Homeland Security changed the rules on asylum seekers in court. It's always previously been the case that if you had checked in at the border and gotten assigned a court date and shown up for your court date, then you had the opportunity to get a credible fear hearing. It might take a while. And, if you weren't found to have credible fear of violence or, if you went back, then you might eventually be deported. But what started happening about 6 weeks ago now is that they changed the rules from people. And even if you showed up for your hearing and did everything you were supposed to do, after your hearing was done, masked ICE agents, some cases without uniforms, lurking in the elevator lobby, would just grab you and detain and deport you. And when I heard this was happening, and then some religious leaders had gone in to try to bear witness and call attention to it, and the NYPD had arrested them, I thought, okay, this is an important moment for elected officials to show up. This is the emergency we've been worrying about. So I asked my team to do some research, figure out the appropriate way to do it. Turns out there's a friend of the court program that you can just volunteer with. And anyone, you don't have to be an elected official, can go into those immigration court proceedings and bear witness and watch what's happening. So I started doing that a couple weeks earlier. And the very first day I went, they said, great, it's good you're here. Instead of sitting in the courtroom and listening, will you please just walk with this person out of the building? They've just had their case adjudicated in a way where we're worried that they're going to be grabbed and detained and deported, but maybe walking with an elected official, and the controller's job comes along with a NYPD detail, a policeman. So I had done that twice previously, and actually with 5 people, just been able to get in the elevator, kind of them shaking, me shaking, but walk out of the building. And that feeling, honestly, was as useful as I have felt since Donald Trump was elected. Like the joy they had, in one case, parents who weren't sure they would be able to get back to their kids who were in school, and just the relief knowing they'd be see their kids again was quite extraordinary. That's what I went to do that day. I had actually walked one family out, beautiful family of 4, beautiful 4 and 5-year-old girls. And then I went back upstairs and sat in on one more court proceeding, and then tried to accompany this gentleman, Edgardo, out of the building. And that was when what played out on national television, and ICE agents descended on us and ripped us apart. And yes, to my total surprise, arrested me. They had already separated us. I mean, I knew they were going to take him. He still remains in ICE detention. I was as surprised as anyone else when they arrested me, and so aggressively. I am glad it called attention to the horror that is taking place in our immigration system. And you're right. For me, it was it was like just within 4 days that I had the debate in which I really took it to Andrew Cuomo on the debate stage. Zohran and I did the cross-endorsement, which generated all this hopeful energy. And then I got arrested trying to stand up for the rule of law and the rights of asylum seekers and against what's happening, as authoritarianism creeps and takes over our democracy. And yes, I mean, I was as surprised as anyone else. I mean, I had spent months trying to get, show New Yorkers the kind of leadership I can provide. And being honest, had struggled to do that, had struggled to break through and help people see the parts of me I wanted to show. And then to have those things happen in such short order, I'm still a little bewildered by all the goodwill it has generated, but just trying to figure out, okay, let's keep going. How do we use this? I mean, I, for the first time in a long time, am feeling genuinely hopeful about the future of New York City. And it is a dark timeline between the pandemic and Trump and Eric Adams' corruption and October 7th and Andrew Cuomo sort of distilling that into a sense of dark inevitability for all the things we hate about this timeline, and to have gotten to be a little part of offering people a more hopeful and collaborative vision for the future. There's just a really nice energy in New York City right now that I think Zohran and this new leadership and this diverse coalition really represents.
I wanted to hit 2 points really quick. We do want to eventually get to sort of the media fallout or reaction or discourse over Mamdani's win. But first, I wanted to mention that your cross-endorsement was not without risk, because if Cuomo wins, the two of you are going to get marginalized in your current positions. Just
worse than that for me. I mean, my job only goes through the end of the year. I did have the thought several times, if Andrew Cuomo's mayor, I'll never work in this town again. So, yes. And look, it had some risk in that way electorally. And as a proud Jewish New Yorker and the highest ranking Jewish elected official in New York City, in a cycle where anti-Semitism and Jewish fear had already been weaponized by Donald Trump, by Eric Adams, and by Andrew Cuomo, I knew what I would be hearing from Jewish New Yorkers. And it was clear to me that it was the right thing to do. But yes, I had definitely accounted for the risks before.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that, because there have been some tweets or skeets or whatever we're doing these days on social media, from conservative pundits, from a small vocal subset of Jewish New Yorkers about leaving New York City after Mamdani's win in the primary. And there's been this such weaponization of anti-Semitism. I wanted to ask you rather to talk about, the dangers of stoking this kind of fear and conflating Zionism with Judaism.
I mean, let me take a step back on weaponization, because early in the race, after he got in, Andrew Cuomo went into a synagogue on the Upper West Side. And let's remember, he hasn't even lived in New York City in 25 years. So how he gets the gall to go into a synagogue on the Upper West Side and call Zohran and Adrian Adams, the black speaker of the city council, and me, the highest ranking Jewish elected official in New York City government, essentially anti-Semitic, was really gross. I mean, and I responded by cursing at him in Yiddish.
Oh, what did you call him?
Well, I actually used two different curses. There was a debate on my team, because the most classic Yiddish curse is gekachen afen yam. And that means go crap in the ocean. But I decided for one that's a little more formal, a bezer gzar gzoleraf der kumen, which is more like, may an evil decree come upon you. And I'm just saying he did lose. So maybe, the hexing was effective. But this is in this tradition of this moment where, Donald Trump calls Chuck Schumer a Palestinian, managing to be both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic in the same sentence. And Eric Adams is running in November on a ballot line called Stop Anti-Semitism, the most craven effort to convert or weaponize the legitimate fears Jews have about rising anti-Semitism in this moment into his own personal political gain. And I have just had enough of it. Jews should not be treated like pawns. And we need to take a deep breath and say, okay, yes, anti-Semitism is rising, but we can't let our fears, turn us into, and you got to speak out against it. And I mean, for me, fortunately, it's those guys could try to beat us politically, but they can't make me a bad Jew. I have been a critic of Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza for 30 years at this point. And I am someone who continues to be inspired by the vision of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. But that's only plausible in my mind when the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza ends, when the human rights of Palestinians are respected, when their dignity and self-determination and rights are taken just as seriously as Israeli Jews or American Jews. It's going to be a lot of different perspectives on how people approach that set of issues. And Zohran and I don't agree 100% on them, but we do agree everybody deserves to be safe, to be protected, to have their rights protected in Israel and Palestine and in the 5 boroughs. And I would not have cross-endorsed him if I had 1 second's doubt that he cares about and will defend the safety of Jewish New Yorkers, those who consider ourselves Zionists and supporters of some version of Israel, and those who don't, and nonetheless make sure that everybody is safe here. And that is the job of the mayor of New York City. And there was something powerful in the way that he and I, as a Muslim New Yorker and a Jewish New Yorker, were able to be out there saying, we agree on a lot of things. We don't agree on 100% of things, but we're not going to let foreign policy in terms of people's politics around Israel and Palestine, or the fears people have at the moment about hate here, cause Jewish and Muslim New Yorkers to be divided against each other. The only way to be safe is through some version of shared safety where everybody knows, every Jewish New Yorker and Muslim New Yorker and Christian New Yorker and Sikh and Buddhist and non-religious, that they can pray safely.
So this podcast is 4 years old now, 4.5 years old now. This is actually the first time we've talked about Israel and Palestine as a topic. And that's mostly because I feel out of my depth, right? Like, it's not an issue that I cover as a journalist. I'm not a foreign policy journalist. I'm also like an Irish Catholic from New England.
You should listen to our Conclave Me Daddy episode.
Yeah, I cosplayed as the Pope.
I was a bishop. So funny. I was a bishop.
And I just wanted to say, like, I wanted to appreciate you for coming on and talking about this stuff with us so openly, because it's an area that, like, I personally feel uncomfortable. I obviously have my opinions, but I don't express them publicly very often. Having said that, it's not just like Eric Adams and other Jewish New Yorkers, like, expressing reservations about Mamdani's views on that conflict in particular. I have a list here of Democrats who have made comments in the recent weeks. Kirsten Gillibrand is a U.S. Senator from New York, although I think she has walked back her statement since that.
She apologized for what she said, which really was just way over the line. So it was good that she apologized for it.
Representative Tom Suozzi, Eric Swalwell, Eric Adams. I mean, yes, he's not running as a Democrat, but he was elected originally as a Democrat. You have Congresswoman Laura Gillen and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries have all made sort of at least passing comments about what they think of Zohran's views on anti-Semitism, on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I remember distinctly waking up, and one of the first things that I do sometimes is turn on the YouTube channel for the Colbert Report, or the Colbert Show, right? Like the Tonight Show with Stephen Colbert. And I remember your appearance on there with Zohran, and I felt like Stephen kind of unfairly tried to pin down Mamdani on this subject in particular, and you were like sitting there going, no, I wouldn't have endorsed this guy if I felt that this was a thing. So, like, what has it been like being so closely associated with Mamdani in the closing weeks and then since the election, as you're watching this discourse spread across media and social media?
Yeah. I'll say a few things here. First, I mean, there is a shift taking place in the Democratic Party in how you can be critical of Israel and, in my case, still be a, just like passionate, proud Jew, but in any case, be someone who is not anti-Semitic. And if you're running for office, is committed to making sure everyone is safe, including Jews are safe. And, look, one fight we've been having, there are Democrats who essentially are saying, very few people would say any criticism of Israel whatsoever is anti-Semitic, but some people really make it seem like that. And certainly there's a set of people who are even trying to advance a definition of anti-Semitism that says all anti-Zionism or non-Zionism is anti-Semitic. And some of us contest that. Again, I identify as a Zionist, by which I mean I believe and I'm inspired by the vision of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state as per its Declaration of Independence. It is not doing great as a democratic state because you can't hold occupation over millions of people and deny them equal voting rights and call yourself a democracy. And, I've been focused on that for 30 years and most certainly since October 7th. But it's just not accurate to say that anti-Zionism is per se anti-Semitism. And you can know that because there are Hasidic Jews like the Satmar Hasids who are anti-Zionist and are very proud and active Jews. And there are lots of young Jewish people who grew up in synagogues and went to day school and have concluded that having a nation state is not the vision of Judaism that they share. And you could disagree with them politically, but they're proud Jews. They're most certainly not anti-Semitic. And then obviously there are Palestinian human rights activists. One of my favorites, I actually got a message from him that I felt so grateful for, is a guy named Ayman Odeh. He's a member of the Israeli Knesset. He's a Palestinian citizen of Israel and a member of Knesset. He's given his life to trying to support that polity, and he doesn't consider himself a Zionist, but he is no anti-Semite. He has taken great risks to be in partnership with Israeli Jews. So it is most certainly possible to be a sharp critic of the Netanyahu government and the atrocities that it is committing in Gaza. It is possible to be even someone who doesn't believe in that vision of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, and still, without any doubt, not to be anti-Semitic. Again, plenty of Jews have those positions, and plenty of people like Zohran, who I don't believe has an anti-Semitic bone in his body, but who has a different point of view on the conflict. Now, then there's a different question, which is, what does somebody running for mayor of New York City owe to New Yorkers to make them feel safe and comfortable and communicate to Jewish New Yorkers, including those of us who consider ourselves Zionists, that this is still a mayor who will keep us safe, who we're welcome at City Hall, who we're all part of one big New York effort. It's a messy place, but everybody's got to have here, equal rights, equal protections, equal dignity. And that's on every mayoral candidate to do. And, I've been clear on kind of the debate over the last few days is really focused on this phrase, globalize the intifada. And, this one, there may well be, I'm sure there are pro-Palestine activists who, when they say it, mean advocate for the human rights of Palestinians all around the world. But just speaking for myself, when I hear it, given that the Second Intifada did involve a lot of violence against Israeli civilians, and in the wake of the killings that happened in Washington, D.C. and Boulder, Colorado recently, I hear that phrase as meaning open season on Jews. And so I don't like it, and I wish people wouldn't use it. I think there's more effective ways of demanding the equal rights and humanity and dignity and safety and freedom and self-determination of Palestinians. But for what it's worth, it's not a phrase that Zohran himself uses. So
I was just going to say,
an awful lot of media attention on three words he doesn't say. And if it could open us up to conversation, I guess this is what I would say, like what I hope and what I fear. If it could open us up to conversation where we listened better, that would be great. And if it was possible for, pro-Palestine advocates to hear the anxiety that Jews are feeling and maybe think, you know what, I don't need to say it in those words. And if it would be possible for Jewish New Yorkers to recognize that, yes, okay, it's all right for us to be anxious in this moment of rising anti-Semitism. But meanwhile, hundreds of people a day, thousands of people a week are being killed and starved in Gaza, by a government that I just call myself a Zionist is acting in my name. same. And we ought to do better at listening as well. That would be a good thing that could come out of this moment, like come out of our silos and trenches and try to listen to each other a little better and recognize that like New York City has to be a place in which a broad set of people across these lines deserve to be safe.
I feel like we're having a very nuanced discussion here. If the media is equipped, in that very nebulous word, but we saw what the New York Times ran over the weekend about Zohran Mamdani, how...
With the college admissions.
Yeah, with the college admission. Yeah. How can the media do a better job of, having this conversation?
Yeah. I wish I knew. I mean, I have gotten to go on a lot more podcasts, and certainly that is a better and more nuanced form of dialogue than most other things. I mean, I have a lot of frustrations with the New York Times, so you don't get me started. Like 4 years ago, it's their endorsement that helped push me over the top. And I think if they had had an endorsement process, maybe I could have popped for mayor in a different way. But yes, I thought that, especially now that it's come out that they rushed that story into print because they were afraid Christopher Rufo was going to publish it instead. It was like, when you're racing Chris Rufo for a story, maybe it's time to take a breath and answer whether that is an important question. And they are pouring gasoline on a dangerous fire right now. And, so I, what I like, and I do want to give Zohran his credit here, despite all of this, despite like the dark timeline we're in and how challenging, affordability feels like a really precarious, hard issue to people. Boy, the dynamic since October 7th is overwhelmingly negative. He gets death threats. And yet, for the most part, he has been able to run a campaign that has continued to project hopefulness in the incredible diversity that is New York City. That's a big part of what I think our cross-endorsement built on, like across this line of difference. We are still not going to attack each other, be divided from each other. And whether you think of that as Muslims and Jews or liberals and leftists, we've got a shared interest here. And at this moment, especially, I guess what I would say to all those Democratic politicians who are raising issues and haven't endorsed him is something a little different. Like, you don't have to get into the nuances of Israel and Palestine and anti-Semitism. An assemblyman member Michael Lasher, Jewish assembly member from the Upper West Side, just endorsed Zohran and made clear he really disagrees with him on some of these issues, more than I do, but just said he is going to be the mayor. He is the Democratic nominee for mayor. It is time for those who love the city to come together and support him. And I would just say to Democrats in leadership, we had a Democratic primary. Democrats spoke overwhelmingly in this town. He is a person of decency and integrity. And Donald Trump is threatening to strip his citizenship and deport him from the country. Like, we are at a moment of crisis, and it is important for people to rally around an avatar of inclusive multiracial democracy against forces of fascism. Like, that really is how I view it here. And I really would urge other leaders to do the same.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming on the podcast. I have one last question for you. You mentioned that your job ends at the end of the year. What's next for Brad Lander? Are you eyeing a congressional run, Senate, governor? I'm taking my shot here.
Yeah, no, that's fine. What I'll say here is that, happily compared to a month ago when the polls said Andrew Cuomo was going to be the mayor and I thought I'll never work in this town again, I feel like I got a lot of good options. I'm excited about, the campaign that Zohran is running, and he's got a big mandate for change. And if there's a useful way to be helpful in that effort, I'm glad to help however and I'll be excited as the next months tick by to figure out what makes the most sense for me. I'm in this fight. I guess that's what I would say. You can't go around saying the line isn't between progressives and moderates. It's between fighters and folders, and not say I'm ready for the next fight. But there's a lot to do right now, and I got more I want to do standing up for asylum seekers and the rule of law. I've got more I want to do for standing up and fighting for the city that I love. And I'll come back on and let you know when I go exactly where
I'm going to
I'll
hold
be
you to
doing
that.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Brad Lander, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the Cancel Me Daddy family.
Yeah.
I'm very happy
Thank
to
you.
be not canceled.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. And if you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you're an audio-only listener, make sure that your app is set for automatic downloads.
And we just started offering channel memberships. We're doing a monthly live stream for channel members, so be sure to check that out.
Happy canceling!